Walk into a chicken coop on a hot, still afternoon, and the first thing that hits you is not the heat. It is the air, thick, sharp, stinging in your nose. That ammonia smell that rises up out of the bedding when the sun beats down and there is no breeze to carry it off. The birds are panting, holding their wings out from their bodies, standing still because moving makes it worse. That same heavy, stale, stinging air settles into a closed-up bedroom in summer, into a back room that never gets a cross breeze, hot and stale and not good to breathe. Over years of working with animals and living close to the seasons, you learn that you do not need complicated machines to solve simple problems. Today, I want to show you a setup that costs about $7, takes 15 minutes to put together, and runs on nothing but water and a little moving air. It does two things at once. It cools the air coming into a space by a few degrees, and, this is the part most folks do not know, it cleans that air at the same time. It pulls the stink, the damp, and the ammonia right out of it. But before you go out and buy the materials, you must understand there is a catch. In fact, there are several catches to this wet charcoal system that other folks will not mention to you. They want to show you a magic trick that solves all your summer troubles for free. I will not do that. I would rather you trust me than be impressed by me. There are real physical limits to how this works. There are specific safety rules you must follow, and there is a strict maintenance cycle you cannot skip. Stay with me, and we will look at the honest truth of it, step by step. Let me start with the two things going on here, because it is really two natural laws working together, and understanding them is the whole game. The first law is cooling, and it is the oldest cooling there is. It is evaporation. You already know it in your own body. When you sweat and a breeze moves across your skin, you feel cool, because as that water evaporates, it carries heat away with it. Water cannot turn from wet into vapor without taking heat along when it goes. That is just the nature of it. It is a law of physics that has been true since the beginning. So anytime you move air across a wet surface, the air comes out the other side a little cooler than it went in because it left some of its heat behind in the water it dried off. That is why a wet sheet hung in a doorway cools the room behind it. That is why the old folks set a damp cloth over the butter crock to keep it from melting on a summer shelf. Move air across wet, get cool. Simple and time-tested. Now, the second law, and this is what makes charcoal special. Charcoal, the right kind, is the most porous thing you will ever hold in your hand. A single small handful of it, if you could unfold all the little tunnels and pores inside it and lay them out flat, would cover an area you would not believe. Bigger than this whole room, out of a piece you can hold in your palm. It is riddled through and through with tiny passages, like the most complicated sponge ever made. Two things come from all that surface area. One, it holds a tremendous amount of water for its size, and it gives that water up slowly as air moves through it. So it is a wonderful wet surface for that evaporation cooling I just told you about. And two, here is the part the expensive air machines are built around. All those little passages grab hold of the bad things floating in the air, the smell, the ammonia, the damp, sour, stale compounds. The air moving through the charcoal does not just come out cooler. It comes out cleaner because the charcoal catches and holds the foulness as the air passes through. They have a scientific word for it, adsorption, with a D, meaning the stuff sticks to the microscopic surfaces of the carbon tunnels. But you do not need the word. You need to know it pulls the stink out of the air and holds on to it. You are getting both jobs, cooling and cleaning, out of one $7 tray. But here is the first real catch, and I will be very plain about this, because if you get this wrong, you will waste your money and it will not work at all. You must use the right material. What you need is what they call activated charcoal. It is sold as little loose black granules, and you will find it cheapest in the pet section, sold for fish tank and aquarium filters. A bag of it runs about $5 to $8. You can also buy it as horticultural charcoal for gardening, or the kind sold for air filters. Any of those is the right thing. Activated charcoal, that is the word to look for. What you must not use is the charcoal briquettes you cook with on a backyard grill. I must warn you about this with serious pressure. Barbecue briquettes are a completely different material. They are pressed together with chemical binders, coal dust, and starch. They are not activated. They are not riddled with those millions of tiny passages, and they will not cool or clean the air. Worse, if you wet them and blow air across them, you may be breathing in the chemical dust and binders used to hold them together. Do not grab a bag of barbecue briquettes and expect this to work. It will not, and it is not safe. Activated charcoal, the loose, clean black granules, that is the only way. Now, hear me on how you build this system, because the physical dimensions matter if you want it to work as a system rather than a curiosity. You need a shallow tray or pan, a metal baking pan, a plastic storage tray, or a simple wooden box lined with a bit of plastic sheeting. Anything that holds a layer of the granules and lets air move across them. Spread your activated charcoal in the tray in a layer about 1 to 2 inches deep. Do not pile it up high like a mountain. If it is too deep, the air cannot reach the bottom layers and you waste the material. If it is too shallow, it dries out too fast. An inch or two is the sweet spot. Then you wet it. Pour clean water over the charcoal until it is good and soaked all the way through. Let it sit for about 5 minutes so the tiny tunnels can drink their fill. After that, tip the tray gently and pour off any extra water that pools in the bottom. This is a critical step. You want the charcoal wet like a wrung-out sponge, damp clear through, but not sitting in a stagnant puddle. Puddled water blocks the air from reaching the pores of the carbon, and it does not move into the air efficiently. Damp charcoal with air moving across it is what you want. Now, where do you put it? This is where most folks make their biggest mistake. They build a tray, they wet it, and they set it on a table in the middle of a hot room. And then they wonder why they do not feel any cooler. A tray sitting in the middle of a dead room does almost nothing. The cool, damp air just sits there, heavy and stagnant, and never reaches you. You must set the tray right at the intake, in the path of the moving breeze, the window where the outside air comes in, the doorway, or the barn vent. You set the tray right there so that every single breath of air entering the space has to pass across that damp charcoal before it reaches you or your animals. That is the difference between a simple trick and an engineered system. If you have a natural breeze from a window, that is wonderful. If the air is dead, you can use a small, low-wattage fan, perhaps a small solar fan if you are off the grid, to pull the air across the tray. But the rule remains: set it at the intake, keep it damp, and let the moving air do the carrying. Now here is the second catch, and it is the safety point I promised I would not skip. It is the safety of the air you breathe in closed spaces. You might hear some folks warn you that wet charcoal in a room will suck all the oxygen out of the air and suffocate you while you sleep. Let us look at that honestly. In massive, sealed industrial steel tanks, wet carbon can indeed deplete oxygen through slow oxidation. It is a recognized hazard for workers entering those confined industrial spaces. But in a standard home bedroom, a small $7 tray of wet charcoal is not going to pull the oxygen down to dangerous levels. However, there is a very real, very common hazard with setting a wet tray in a closed room, and it is the catch other creators do not mention. If you seal up a bedroom tight, shut the door, close the windows, and leave a big tray of wet charcoal in there with no fresh air coming in, you are turning that room into a muggy, stagnant trap. The water will evaporate, the humidity will climb to 90%, and because the room is sealed, the air cannot escape. You are not cooling the room, you are turning it into a swamp. And in that warm, stagnant dampness, you are inviting mold, mildew, and bacteria to grow on your walls, your bedding, and inside the tray itself. So, the safety rule is absolute. This system is only for spaces with air moving through them. An open window, an open vent, a cross breeze. Keep the air moving, which you want for the cooling anyway, and you are perfectly safe. Never use this in a sealed, shut-up little room with no ventilation. If the air cannot flow, do not set the tray. Let us move to the third catch, which is the geographic limit of evaporative cooling. This is where the internet tells the biggest lies, and I will be very straightforward with you about it. Evaporation only cools when the air has room to take on more moisture. It depends entirely on the relative humidity of your climate. In dry country, out west, in the high plains where the air is thirsty, this system is beautiful. The dry air pulls water off that wet charcoal fast and hard, and you can get a real satisfying temperature drop of 5 to 8 degrees right at the window. It is enough to feel plainly on your skin. But if you live in the damp east, down along the Gulf or in the humid south, the air on a summer day is already half full or three-quarters full of water. It is muggy. The air is not thirsty, so it cannot take much more moisture off the charcoal. In those places, the cooling effect is very modest, maybe 1 or 2 degrees at best. It will not feel like a dramatic plunge. So let me set your expectations honest. I am not going to tell you a $7 tray of charcoal will cool your whole house like a modern air conditioner in a Mississippi August, because it will not. Anyone who tells you so is selling you an illusion. What it will do, regardless of where you live, is clean the air. The absorption process, the way the carbon traps smells, smoke, and ammonia, works just as well in high humidity as it does in dry desert air. Know what the system can do and know what it cannot. Honest is better than impressive. And that brings us to the fourth catch, the maintenance and the truth about how long the charcoal lasts. The charcoal dries out. It works by being damp, which means you must re-wet it. It is a daily routine. Every morning, you must take 30 seconds to pour a cup of water over the tray and drain the excess, or you are just looking at a dry pan of black rocks doing nothing. And then there is the question of saturation. Many folks will tell you that when the charcoal stops catching smells after a month or two, you can simply spread it out in the sun for a day, and the solar heat will reactivate it, making it as good as new forever. I will not tell you a thing that is not true. Sun drying is a fine way to dry the carbon out, and the heat of the sun will drive off simple moisture and some of the lightest, most volatile odor compounds. It gives you a helpful temporary refresh. But the sun cannot reactivate saturated carbon. To truly reactivate activated charcoal, to clear out the heavy organic compounds, the oils, and the deep pollutants trapped in those microscopic tunnels, requires industrial kilns heated to over 800 degrees Celsius in an oxygen-free steam environment. You cannot do that in your backyard, and the sun cannot do it on your porch. After 1 to 2 months of heavy use in a stuffy room or a smelly coop, the tiny passages inside the carbon will be fully saturated, packed tight like a sponge that has soaked up grease. When that time comes, you must be honest with yourself. You cannot wash it and you cannot sun it back to life. You must replace those granules with a fresh bag. One $8 bag lasting 2 months of the hottest season is still a wonderful bargain, but do not believe the myth of the forever filter. Where this system truly earns its keep is not as a replacement for a whole house air conditioner, but as a local helper in the places that need it most. Think of a chicken coop in high summer. It is a hard place for a bird. Chickens do not sweat. They must shed heat by panting and holding their wings away from their bodies. When the temperature inside the coop climbs into the 90s, they begin to suffer, and when it goes past 100, it turns deadly. And on top of that heat, you have the ammonia building up out of the bedding, stinging their eyes and damaging their lungs. It is a real matter of animal welfare, not just comfort. If you build a small frame from scrap wood, open on 2 sides, line it with a fine wire screen or hardware cloth to hold the granules, and fill it with an inch of activated charcoal, you can slide that frame right into the main vent opening of the coop. When the summer breeze passes through that vent, the air entering the coop is cooled by the evaporation, which is a mercy to a panting bird. More than that, the charcoal catches the rising ammonia and holds it, keeping the air inside the coop sweet and clean. For a coop in a heat wave, that is the difference between birds that suffer and birds that come through. It works the same way for a rabbit hutch, a dog kennel, or a hot corner of a barn where your animals shelter. It works the same way in the human house. If you have a stuffy back bedroom, a workshop, or a small room where you want the air to feel cleaner and gentler, set the tray in the open window. It is a local helper. It does not have a motor, and it does not force the air through dense sheets like an active, expensive HEPA machine. It relies on the natural movement of the breeze. But for the spot where you sit, or the bed where you sleep, it takes the edge off the heat and cleans the air coming through without adding a single cent to your power bill. Now, think about what we are sold every day to solve these problems. We are told we must buy the $300 air purifying machine. It sits in the corner, hums with a motor, and requires a proprietary replacement filter every 3 months. You must buy their brand in their plastic housing at their price year after year. And here is the quiet truth of the matter. The material inside that expensive plastic filter, the active ingredient that actually does the work of pulling the odors and the toxins out of your air, is this exact same activated charcoal. It is the very same material you can buy in a plain bag in the pet aisle for the price of a sandwich. The appliance companies take that cheap, natural material, seal it in a branded plastic cartridge, mark the price up 10 times, and sell you a subscription to clean air. They do not want you to know you can buy the raw carbon, set it in a simple tray at your window, wet it with a cup of well water, and get the same local cleaning job done for $7. They cannot put a patent on a window breeze. They can't send you a monthly bill for a wooden tray you built with your own hands. The knowledge of these simple setups is not hidden in a secret vault. It is just quiet. It is quiet because quiet things do not make corporate profits. The expensive machines shout at you from the advertisements, while the simple tray of charcoal sits on the sill and works in silence. We use these simple methods because they connect us to the physical reality of the world. A man who can cool and clean the air for his family and his animals with a tray of charcoal and the breeze through his window is a man who has reclaimed a small piece of his independence. He does not need to ask a corporation's permission. He does not need to worry about a power outage during a heat wave. And he does not need to pay a recurring bill to keep his birds alive or his bedroom breathable. So as the heat of the summer comes on, I encourage you to look at the simple things. Get yourself a bag of loose activated charcoal, the aquarium filter granules, not the barbecue briquettes. Find a shallow tray, fill it an inch deep, wet it down until it is damp like a wrung-out sponge, and set it right in the path of the incoming breeze. Remember the limits. Keep the air moving, do not seal it in a tight room, re-wet it each morning, and replace the carbon when it has done its season of work. The people who built our farms and worked the land before us did not have power lines or plastic filters, but they understood the laws of water, wind, and earth. Those laws have not changed. They are just as true today as they were 100 years ago, and they are still there, waiting for us to remember them.